Sweet. Well, we are rolling.
Wow. Once again.
Yep. Round 3 here. Doing things a little bit different today. We're standing. Should we have our hands in our pockets or not? I'm going to go freehand. Pocket's a little unprofessional, I guess. Good morning, everybody. Dylan and Robby here at MountainOps in Stowe, Vermont, USA. Home of the Green Mountains.
Back again. Looking more and more like spring out there.
Yeah. I noticed the mountain has melted out quite a bit in the last day. It was hot yesterday. It felt like summer.
Yeah, it was a good bit hot. It was 80 at the house, and then I went up skinning in the afternoon thinking surely it'll drop, hopefully 10, 15 degrees when I get up there. Didn't drop a single degree. 80 degrees at the house, 80 degrees at the mountain.
Good deal. It's beach weather.
Yeah, but it was still hanging on. I went up and down, nosedive, and you can still get top to bottom. No dirt patches just yet. Plenty of moving water though, so it's going quick. So get it while you can.
Yeah. What'd you use yesterday?
Yesterday I used the Faction, the Llama Sheens Mini.
Cool.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, you've been on that. Is this new this year for you?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's the Faction rep Eric, he hooked it up, and this ski has always been on my mind, and it kind of fits the style of ski that I enjoy, and so I was curious about it. So yeah, he hooked it up big time, and I've been loving it. It's been a fun ski.
Cool.
Super fun.
Robby's mic fell.
Oh God.
And we're going to use this opportunity to plug. We're talking about Robby's Quiver today. So, talking skis and bindings.
Yep. Specifically going to go over the bindings. And kind of the pros and the cons, the good, the bad. The skiers that I think they're good for. Ease of use for the consumer, but then also the shop tech. But yeah, just sharing some opinions on some of the bindings that I chose and like. Figured I'd start on that side.
Yeah, cool. I think we'll also kind of talk about the use case for each ski and who each of these skis is for. So
yeah,
we're gonna start with the skinny boys.
Start with the skinny boys. Kind of work our way down, and it is kind of going from lightest binding to heaviest binding, and we'll talk about that too. But so first, we've got the ATK Helio 145, or I guess it's the Black Diamond Helio 145, but the ATK Trofeo. This is back when ATK was making those guys. This is the 10 DIN release value. They got a 6, 8, and 10 there. And so this is, you can kind of see I'm somewhat favoring ATK, and there's a reason for that. They make some really strong, reliable, lightweight bindings, and this is no exception to that. And so with this being 145 grams, without the base plate adds like 25, 30 grams to it, so a little bit heavier. But this is one of the more reliable, burly, simplistic bindings, if not the most simplistic binding, like in terms of like touring. That you can get out there. Super simple, super easy. You've got your flat mode, you've got your mid-rise or your high-rise, and that's really it. And so there's not a whole lot of bells and whistles and a lot going on, but easy toe stepping, easy manipulation back here. There's not a whole lot to break. If you do break it, you can replace almost everything on this. One thing that is a little tricky with how simplistic it is and how bare bones it is, that means it's exposed to a lot of the elements, and there's not a whole lot going on in terms of the releasability. And so that twisting motion, it's really just a ball and a spring and grease that's in this back bit here, and that gets wet and dirty. It's not going to twist, it's not going to release nearly as well. And so being able to lube that up or replace it is pretty darn huge, and it's an easy fix. So if you do have this binding and you're having a really hard time twisting that, then bring it on in and we can absolutely lube it up and see if we need to replace those bits for you. But yeah, one of the more simplistic bindings out there. If you're looking for a Fremo style binding and ski combination, or just something that is just bare bones for your powder rig, this is an awesome option.
Totally. And just a preface here, Robby is a certified, an ATK certified ski binding technician. Went to the training up in, where was it, Montreal?
Yeah, Montreal.
And yeah, there's not a lot of ATK certified ski techs out there, and Robby's one of them. And I just want to talk about this ski and binding a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, this is your fast and light setup, yeah?
Yeah, I use one of my fiance's even a little bit lighter setup because luckily we can fit into the same skis and boots. But yeah, this is my personal one.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I think just to go a little bit higher level, you know, Mr. ATK ski tech over here, you like you like getting down into the weeds, and that's awesome. You know, that's what people come to listen for. For those looking for a high level view, this is probably the lightest, most durable all-round binding you can get right now.
Yeah,
hands down, plain and simple.
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah.
Dynafit is a company that pioneered the modern tech binding design with the toe pin in the front and the heel pins in the rear. I think ATK has really taken it into 2025.
Yeah.
And really, you know, I mean, ATK has been around for a long time. They haven't been in the U.S. for very long, but their DNA is quite literally in Ferrari. A few guys were machinists at Ferrari making engines for them in Modena, and they said, let's make a ski binding, and so they did, and I think they're some of the best in the world. What sets ATK apart from a lot of other bindings is their extremely fine tolerances, and the fact that they basically machine every component out of a single block of aluminum. And they are really, really good about recycling a lot of the spent metal and repurposing it and remolding it into new blocks and whatnot. They just have good business practices and impeccable engineering and design. And it shines through. If you look at a ski binding wall, insert clip of ski binding wall here at MountainOps, you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities between a lot of the ATK bindings, and they're very aesthetic. They have clean lines. There's no added weight or superfluous components to them. They're just simple but effective and extremely durable because of all the metal. A lot of other bindings you'll see on the market, you know, I have a G3Z. There's a lot of plastic in that, and I've had to repair a few components on it already. These bindings just really do it. And I think this Trofeo is kind of what the speed turn should have evolved into, the Dynafit speed turn. I don't know. It's just that durable, burly, lightweight, simplistic binding. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can put this on your training setup for your skimo race, a freemo setup, kind of like this. Or, I mean, I've seen people put this on just absolute powder rigs, like 110 plus underfoot. Like, if you're just skiing pure powder, then why not go super simplistic?
Totally.
And easy. And so it's an incredibly versatile binding. And that's because of how light it is, but then how durable it is.
Right. And so explain the term freemo for those uninitiated.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's something that we stole from these Wander guys over here. Freemo, or a little bit heavier than skimo, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's like that 1,000-gram ski, 150, 200 gram binding kind of deal, and then 1,000-gram boot. And so it's something that, like, you can still be fast and light, but durable enough to, you know, ski some bigger lines in the backcountry. So, yeah.
Cool. Made for long distances and big vertical.
Yeah, just making up names for the ski industry. You know?
Yeah, cool. We like it. I think that's, you know, for the skimo curious, or for the folks who are trying to do those bigger days or do multiple laps, I think that is a really good setup for that. You know, somebody who's not competing competitively, but who, you know, wants to go out and try their hand at lastskierstanding or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a cool setup.
Big
and
time.
it's like, it's useful and practical for, like, all your other skiing that you do, instead of just having that one ski that's made for a skimo race. I think something like that's a good compromise for the wallet.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I take this set up in the backcountry all the time, and it's, I don't know, on the right ski, in terms of Freemo setups, like I have a great time skiing powder in these guys.
Totally.
It's good fun.
Yeah, I have the Black Diamond Cirque 78, and that's kind of my category ski with that. I was going to put my Trofeos on there, but I wanted something with some elasticity in the heel, so I put some Ski Trap Titan Vario 2s on them.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, next one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. All right, so the next one is the Plume Wazo 8. This one's coming in around 205 grams. And again, these are all, any weight that I'm saying is the advertised weight. I did not put any of these bindings on a scale to test them out. But for the most part, a lot of these companies that we're talking about are pretty darn accurate. But for the Wazo, there's a 4, 6, 8. And so this is the 8. This one's a little bit beefier than the Trofeo over there, so it does have a lateral din. It still has that U-bolt or the U-spring for the vertical release, and that's where that 8 comes in. So the 8 is that U-bolt release, but you can adjust the lateral release from a 4 up to a 10. And this one's been good. I've been liking this one a lot. And the same kind of reasons and category as to why I like the Trofeo. It's simplistic. It's got a bunch of metal in it. It's easy. There's not a whole lot to break. You can replace a lot of the bits and bobs on it. Like some of these companies, or a lot of binding companies, you can't get all the spare parts and fix it yourself because you need special tools or learning or whatnot. But Plume, you can actually, as a consumer, go onto their website and buy any of these bits and bobs yourself, which is huge.
That's cool.
And a lot of it's easy enough and simple enough to where you don't need special tools to replace a lot of these things, which to me is huge. And so if you're an expedition skier, if you're a tinkerer, if you like to bring a lot of spare parts with you out because you're traveling, or just going really deep into the backcountry, like I think Plume's an incredible option because of how easy it is to even fix in the field with some of these bits. And so it's a great option for that. I think it skis pretty darn well. You can add this little bumper thing. You can take it off. You can add a brake to it. And so it's versatile in that. You can take off your crampon adapter here if you want to save 10 grams. Yeah, it's a pretty darn good binding. The toe gets a little bit sticky sometimes. And so that's, you'll have that in some bindings, but it will stick up a little bit.
No binding is without its flaws.
No.
Every binding, every piece of gear has its pluses and minuses.
Absolutely.
I would say.
Yep. If you I like to switch this boot or this ski specifically to a bigger boot and a lighter boot. And that switching up process is kind of a pain in the butt if you are that type of person who likes to swap back and forth between boots. Just the adjustment is there's an adjustment up front, screw up front here, and then there's one behind, and so you have to twist it. And so it's not super easy. It's not going to be a 5-minute process or a 2-minute process. It's going to be a little bit more cumbersome than that. And these are just metal screws, so eventually you're going to strip them out and kind of wear them out. And so there's some drawbacks there too.
Yeah.
But if you're not switching, then it doesn't matter. Yeah, Plume's an awesome setup.
And in comparison to this right here, so you have the adjustment plate. Let's get it a little closer to the camera here so I can see it. So our ATK here has the adjustment plate, and you'd say that's pretty easy to adjust on right there. So ATK gets the win on that adjustability.
Yep. Yeah, big time. It's just so much easier to make sure you have that gap adjustment on this one compared to this guy. Like as soon as you've kind of figured out like one binding, you can figure out the other in terms of where to place it. But yeah, it's definitely easier with the ATKs, that's for sure.
Cool.
Still not the easiest compared to some of these other guys, but easier.
Yeah. Well, that's all good.
Yeah, a great one too. Like this is, like I said, 205 grams, a little bit more durable, a little bit more rugged than the Trofeo. Again, you can throw it on a 1,000-gram ski. You can throw it on a 1,800-gram ski. It's a versatile binding and skis well.
So what do you have it mounted on right now?
I got on the wndralpine 98, the reverse cambered.
How's that been for you?
It's been sweet.
Looks pretty new. That new this year?
Last year.
Last year? Cool.
Last year, yeah. I try to keep them clean.
Yeah. Cool. And what's your sweet spot for that ski? Where do you find yourself using that the most?
Like condition-wise and everything?
Yeah. Like what makes you reach for that ski?
Yeah. Typically earlier season when we have a lot more schwack. Not the schwack hasn't been fully covered up yet. You got to make tighter turns, twistier turns. You got to be extra nimble. That's usually when I like that ski, just because of how easy it is to pivot around and wiggle around. I'd say on like steeper, firmer kind of stuff with that reverse cambered, it tends to noodle out a little bit. And typically I'm skiing it with my softer boot, and so that also noodles out. And so I like a little bit softer, a little bit lower angle conditions with that guy for sure.
So not your tux ski.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Not for me, at least. Not with my boot and the reverse cambered. Now, the regular cambered ski of that version, yeah, all day.
Cool.
That'd be a perfect tuck ski.
Yeah, nice.
But
yeah, it's beefy enough that you can be really confident in steep terrain.
Oh, yeah.
Good edge hold.
Yeah.
On the cambered version.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Nice. Yeah, I like that 98 millimeter width. I think that's a really good sweet spot for all around East Coast skiing. You could take it out west too.
Yeah.
You know.
Big time.
Yeah, I think that's a nice sweet spot. Anything 90 to 100 underfoot, I think, is like for your first or like only backcountry ski. I think that's where you should be looking.
Yep. Big time. It's a good width for that do-it-all Swiss Army knife.
Cool.
Yep. But yeah, Plume Wazo, great option, pretty darn versatile. So yeah, next one, the ATK Hot Route Plus. So this one, somewhat similar to the Plume Wazo there, but you get a little bit more features. And so this one, it does have an adjustable vertical or lateral release and vertical release. So you get that extra little safety factor there. Twisting it around, you do get a true flat mode. You got a mid riser and you've got a high riser. And so for those folks, if you don't have flexible ankles or you don't have a good walking boot, having that extra heel riser is a bit nice. Or if you're just constantly trudging through really deep snow and setting that skin track, that's a great thing to have there. But this is probably one of my,
Just stick it in your pocket.
Just keep dropping this. One of, if not my most favorite touring binding on the market, just because of how easy it is, how simplistic it is, that having that lateral and that vertical release, it's great. It's easy to work on for us too, maintenance-wise. All it's got is that little spring back here that you need to grease up every once in a while. Mounting wise, super simple, super easy. Don't see a lot of them coming back broken. So yeah, it's a pretty sweet binding. This guy's weighing 220 grams, I believe. I don't know if I said that yet, but yeah, it's one of, like I said, one of my more favorite bindings. But
I think it strikes a really nice balance between simplicity and some added safety features over the Trofeo, with that elasticity and that vertical and lateral release.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So the Trofeo has the U-spring, right? Which doesn't provide quite as much in terms of versatile release, if you will. This has pins.
Yep.
That don't these rotate in parallel to each other?
It's like the ATK camming system, so they move almost like in a rounded pattern versus just out. And so anytime you have a U-spring or a U-bolt with any sort of binding, they are just going to get wider this way when there is enough force coming up and out. And so depending on how old your springs are, or these things bend as well. And so they're not always reliable in that sense. And so these are going to wear down significantly faster. They're going to wear your boot down significantly faster. And those tech fittings in the back, because of how much pressure they have to put on there every single time they're coming in and out. And so these are going to wear down a lot quicker than those, and they're going to be a lot less reliable than those, because you can replace every bit of that, lube it up, grease it up, and it's not going to wear down your boot or the binding nearly as much.
I think if weight is your biggest concern, you can't really get lighter than a U-spring. It's just simpler. There's less stuff involved. All the stiffness comes from that U-spring. So an 8 or a 6 is going to be a little bit flexier, a little bit less stiff than a 10 in that U-spring. With the camming system on a binding like this, it's a little bit more intricate, a little bit more material involved with providing that release value, but it's going to be more reliable. It's going to be a little bit more consistent over the long term.
Just safer.
Yeah, so if you don't need to go the absolute lightest, which most people don't, this is a really good compromise over the Trofeo, I think.
I mean, 220 grams is still like insanely light for how many features like this thing has.
100%.
And that's why I can like throw it on this like bigger ski or heavier ski. I think this guy's weighing like 18 or 1850, 100 grams. And so it's definitely by no means a light ski for touring. Some people would argue that it is, but I don't know. In my opinion, it's not a crazy light ski, but I can toss a 220 gram binding on there, and this setup actually weighs less than this setup. And so
cool. I like that. And this binding isn't made for hucking cliffs.
No,
but it's awesome for going out and hitting Sterling Valley or most things that you'll ski here in Vermont.
I'm not a good enough skier to be hucking cliffs, so I don't need that.
If you're in steep, consequential terrain, maybe you want something a little burlier. There's always that highly debated toe lockout if you don't want your ski to detach. I don't really recommend that, but
I like my knees the way they are.
Unaltered.
A
lot of folks don't really like this flappy system because they think it gets in the way. It's magnetized on the back, but if you just push, it locks in. So when you have your binding in walk mode and you don't want these risers constantly flipping up on you, just give it a little push.
Simple as that.
Good. Yeah.
Simple as that.
It's a cool binding. It also has the same adjustment plate as the Trofeo. I like that they build stuff around a similar platform to kind of future-proof it and make it more versatile, as well as kind of trying to keep costs a little bit lower. They're just smart about that.
Oh, they are the best in terms of kind of compatibility between bindings, mounting. Mike and I, our favorite jig downstairs is the ATK jig. It is, first off, just a work of art, but then they're not changing the whole patterns every other time. You can mount every single binding from ATK with one jig, which, I mean, I guess besides 22 Designs, G3, but they don't have nearly as many bindings as ATK does, and styles of bindings too. And so it's huge. They think about the full picture, front of the house and the back of the house stuff, which is great for us, and that's why we like working with them so much.
They're cool.
Yep. All right.
So let's put this banana away.
Yeah, we'll stop drilling over ATK here.
Actually, I should call this one the banana.
All right, so this is like a tried true classic. This ski I've had for a long, long time, and it's the only ski that I can't get rid of and sell. And so I wanted a binding that was going to stand the test of time, last a long time, be super durable. And that's why I got the Dynafit Speed Turn. And so this is a super old binding in terms of like when it came out and made. It's steel, steel up here, steel up here. So it's super strong, super durable. But it's just one of the more simplistic bindings on the market, like just in
Yep.
terms of like what the technology that it's using, how old that technology is. But this binding is maybe 5 years old, and it still looks pretty damn new. Like there's not a whole lot of wear and tear on it, and that just tells you how reliable it is. And I mean, if anything does break, just like in terms of the heel tower, you can pop that sucker off, slap a new one on. That's pretty darn easy. But we haven't seen too many of these guys come on back. And if they do come back broken, they are 10, 15 years old, and they probably deserve to break. And you shouldn't be skiing those bindings anyways. If they're 10, 15 years old, they're definitely smoked.
I broke one.
Yeah, you did?
Yeah,
Nice.
I broke the heel pin retaining element here. But I was skiing the ski completely how it shouldn't have been skied. It was my first lightweight ski setup. I had the Rossignol BC 120, and I threw the speed turn on it, and very, very affordable ski setup. It was great.
Yeah.
But I was so excited about it, I went and skied it at the resort, and I was hitting jumps and everything the same way I would with my resort alpine setup, and yeah, I just exploded the
Smashed it.
one of the few plastic pieces on this binding, and it released from my heel, and the ski shot off like a torpedo into the woods.
Yeah.
And really glad I didn't hit someone. But yeah, don't ski tech bindings at the resort. Just don't do it.
No.
You'll see people do it. You can do it, but don't do it.
Certain bindings are definitely, you can get away with it more so than others. This is,
If you
I've done
do,
it.
Use a leash.
You know, like this is the ski that I took to Cook City one time. And then we went to Bridger Bowl afterwards and skied this inbounds. But you just kind of ski it differently. You're not smashing. You're not charging. You just ski it differently.
Yep, just have fun.
But yeah, in terms of weight, this guy, I believe, is coming in at 350 grams.
Mm-hmm.
Price point around the same, like $350, $375, something like that. So like,
Yeah, it's like $350.
Yeah, pretty crazy
off
cheap.
on sale.
And so like looking for a cheap setup, like this is an awesome cheap setup. Especially with, I mean, ATK is getting more and more expensive. They definitely have some cheaper models, but $350, $375, like that's hard to beat these days.
Totally. I think it's still one of the best value bindings
Absolutely.
out there.
Yep.
You know, the ATK Trofeo comes in, at $400, and that's not super expensive for that kind of tech, but
Yep.
yeah, $350, $300, depending on what you can find it for.
Yep.
Really good value. It's going to last you a long time. I got a pair for my dad for his first touring setup, and he's still using that. I think anybody looking to get into the sport, look at the speed turn. It's nice.
Yep.
Yep.
Downside to this guy, or not one downside, one of the downsides to this guy is the ramp angle or the delta for the binding there. And so it's got a really high heel, it's got a really low toe. And so for folks that have smaller feet or smaller boots, you're going to feel that angle a lot more drastically. For people with bigger boots and bigger feet, it's going to be less of an issue. And so I ski in a 25.5, like for some reason, I don't feel that angle too much. I should with that size boot, but I don't. And I think it's partially due to how big the shovel is up here, that it's constantly kind of lifting the front of the ski up and me being able to push it down with that angle. And so maybe or at least that's my nonsense theory.
Seems legit.
My bro science there. But just be aware that if you do have, and what I mean by small boots, I mean like 21.5, 22.5, 23.5, 24.5, like those small boots, and big boots 27 plus. You might not feel that as much. And so just be aware of that for the smaller folks. That delta and that ramp angle might be a bit much. And so, yeah.
Insert Pythagorean theorem here.
Yeah, I'm not smart enough to give you all the details as to what that's going to do to you.
One thing I think this binding lacks, which for the value it's fine. You could bump up to the speed radical, but in order to change the riser setting, you have to reach down behind you and rotate the heel turret.
Yeah. You can use your pole, but it's
That's a skill.
yeah. And especially around here too, if your poles are icing up and globbing up because you just stuck them in a river, it gets harder and harder. That's for sure.
Yep. But that's just one thing to keep in mind. I wouldn't necessarily use this if you're gonna be doing something that requires you to change your heel riser setting all the time.
Yeah.
This is, to me, just kind of a set it and forget it type of thing, but yeah. Yep, I think that's one of the few downsides on this binding, but for the value, it's great. Again, the speed radical basically is the speed turn with 2 additional flappy heel risers.
2 flappers.
2 flappers.
Yep. Great value though.
Yep, that's a good one.
All right, moving on to the next one. So this is an ATK R13 Evo, but I kind of made it into a free raider. So the R13 doesn't come standard with the tow shim or the free ride spacer, but you can add all of those things. And so
can you explain that tow shim and the free ride spacer?
Yeah, and so the ATK series, it's kind of tricky, and at least folks seem to have a hard time grasping it. There's a lot of ATK bindings, and so there's the Raider series, and then there's the Free Raider. Now the Raider series, there's a couple different models, and that's like the 11, the 13, and that's only the DIN. And that's not going to come with the tow shim or the free ride spacer. And then you bump up to the Free Raider, same binding, like just the DIN gets bumped up a little bit more so. And then you add that tow shim and that free ride spacer. And what that does is that, just like we were talking about with that Dynafit, the ramp angle, that tow shim lifts you up a little bit so it mellows out that ramp angle. And then that free ride spacer gives you 4 points of contact on that binding. And so it is trying to allow you to drive the edges of the ski a little bit better versus just relying on the pins. And so every single one of these bindings that's on here, when you're in there, you're connected 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the back, it's obviously a lot narrower, and so you're just pushing and pulling on those pins every single time you're making a turn. And so that free ride spacer is trying to add those points of contact so you can push onto this edge as you're driving that inside edge and push onto this edge as you're driving that outside edge or whatever.
So it widens the contact area of the heel of your boot.
Yep.
As well as increasing the amount of surface area for more power transfer.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And so it makes, I skied this binding without the free ride spacer, and then I added it, and I thought it made a massive difference. It's on powder and soft snow backcountry stuff, you're not going to notice a difference. It doesn't make enough of a difference, in my opinion. But when you're skiing firm stuff, like I'll take this ski inbound sometimes, firm stuff, bumps, trees, icy groomers, like that's when this thing makes a huge difference in my opinion. And you can really start to dig in that edge and feel it. And so, yeah, I turned it into kind of like a half free raider. I didn't add that tow shim, partially because I'm lazy, but also I just didn't feel that ramp angle as much. And so I was fine with just keeping it out and not adding that.
So that tow shim will raise the toe piece a couple millimeters just to
4
flatten
millimeters.
it out for you.
Yep,
cool.
Yep. Just to level out that delta there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did have a really small foot, then again, that's when that tow shim might make more of a difference for you.
Yep. And I think it's really important to take into account what kind of boot you have. You know, if you're in a Solomon Shift or a Cochise or something like that may not have a ton of range of motion in walk mode, you know, that's when it's nice to really make sure you're adjusting the delta on your bindings if you can. Or rather, that's when you'll notice a delta more. If you are in something like a Dynafit Radical Pro or a Scarpa F1 LT that has infinite range of motion, basically, you're not going to feel it as much because you're able to have more flexion in your ankle.
Yep. But this binding, it's got a release value in the toe, so not a din, release value in the toe. And it's got release value in the heel, so lateral and vertical, and it has elasticity. And so that means that this whole heel tower binding is moving. It technically has 14 because you have a 4 millimeter offset, and it's got 10 mils of elasticity there. And so 4 bindings in the ATK world as of, well, not anymore with the high binding coming out, but for tech bindings, full tech bindings, pin toes, pin heel, this is probably the strongest skiing tech binding on the market, in my opinion. But, you know, who cares about my opinion?
Yeah, I think it, you know, much love to Marker, but I think this really antiquates a lot of bindings. Kind of, you know, I think the Marker Kingpin. This makes the Marker Kingpin a really tough argument.
Yeah.
Similar price points too.
Yep.
You know, the Kingpin's not a cheap binding. Certainly heavy. It's like 600 grams versus what, like 375 or 400 for this one.
The regular Raider is 370, and then the free Raider 15 is 395. And so this guy's probably sitting with that free ride spacer, but not the toe shim, probably sitting around 180 or 380, 385, something like that. So still like stupid light for how many features it has and how well it skis.
Yep.
And so for this category, that free ride category, in terms of tech bindings, like this is the lightest you can go.
Yeah, I think like 5 or 6 years ago, you know, you'd be at Tuckerman's and you'd see everybody with Marker Kingpins.
Yep.
Seen a lot more of these now.
Yep, big time.
So yeah,
big time. There are like, I mean, in terms like there are a lot of bells and whistles, and these things, we do see these things come back broken sometimes. Like ATK is incredibly reliable and strong, but what we do see come back broken is the AFD, the heel AFD slides off. The free ride spacers, we've seen a lot of those actually start popping off. And so, you know, make sure to keep an eye on that because that is going to affect your release. And so we can replace those, absolutely. But yeah, make sure to check that out. And then the twisting here, if you do start to feel like it's getting harder and harder and stickier, which I know is hard to tell when it's your own binding because it usually happens over time and it's not going to be this overnight thing. But if anything, bring them in at least once a season at the beginning or at the end of the season. Let us check it over. Let us re-grease these the springs in here because now you have to re-grease the heel tower and the toe with that din in the toe there and making sure all of that stuff is working properly. Because if that stuff does get sticky and it's not working properly, then what's the point of having that release value in the toe and the heel? Like, you bought this binding probably because of those safety features, and what's the point of having them if they're not going to work properly? And so make sure to bring them on in. We haven't in the shop decided whether or not, if you bought the binding here, if we're going to charge you for that stuff or if that's part of the purchase. So if you bring it in now, you might get a good deal.
We've been known to help people out here and there. Yeah. Shout out to Greg.
Yeah. And so, yeah, make sure you're checking that stuff out and make sure you're bringing it in at least once a season for us to take a peek and check it on over and just make sure we can tackle that stuff before it becomes a huge, huge issue and we can't fix it anymore. So
you take your kids to the doctor for their annual checkups. Why wouldn't you bring your bindings in for their annual checkup? It's the same thing.
Exactly.
So, quick question for you, Robby.
Yeah.
What made you choose this binding for this ski, the Forefront Raven?
Yeah. I mean, the Raven it's not a super light ski by any means. I think this size is weighing in around like 1,750, 1,800 grams. So definitely not a uber lightweight, touring ski. And I wanted something to be able to ski inbounds or some harder, steeper terrain and feel confident with the binding. And so I went with this guy.
So where do you find yourself skiing this the most?
Either inbounds or in the notch or, typically just inbounds in the notch.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I also like, I don't know if you mentioned this, a lot of the ATK bindings have an adjustable release value in the toe as well. You'll notice some of the bindings have a really, really light, minimalistic, heavily machined out toe piece here. Some are a little bit more solid, especially the free raiders. And you'll notice that if you see this little turret here and that small window, that is a releasable toe or an adjustable release value toe. I think that's really important for a lot of folks.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how I base my decision on binding like this.
Big time. One thing I do that does bug me about almost every ATK binding is that they have a little window back here that has their symbol, ATK. And every single binding that I've had, that thing has fallen off. And so it just seems, a little bit of a waste. I don't know what they could do to fix that. Maybe just make it a permanent thing. We have those stickers, and so if yours does fall off, we can replace them, but they're just going to fall off again.
Dude, I take mine off. Weight savings.
Yeah, it's the same thing with that guy, and I think it's because when you turn it, your heel is hitting here, and then when the ski flexes, when you're like climbing over a bump or a trough or whatever, it's bumping right up to that thing, and so your heel is just ripping it right off. And so around here with all the river crossings and nonsense that we're going skinning through, you're inevitably going to flex the ski to hit that guy.
Yeah, man, whenever I'm doing all my spring hikes, man, I just see ATK stickers everywhere in the woods.
Yeah. And so that is a gripe that I do have with some of their bindings for sure. But I'm sure they will recognize that, and I'm sure they will fix it eventually.
So for all your grievances with the ATK bindings, you still have a lot of them. And I think it's important to note that the foundation of these bindings is incredibly solid.
Yeah.
It's the things, it's kind of some of these add-on pieces that almost kind of seem like an afterthought for the company. You know, they've spent so much energy and investment in designing the foundation, which we really don't see a lot of those components breaking. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the free ride spacers might fall off. I think, you know, over the next couple seasons we'll see improvements there on that front.
Yep. Well, I mean, that's like one of our favorite things about ATKs, that in our opinion they're one of the few companies that are still trying to actively push and pursue a better product in the binding world. And so I'm sure in 5 years and 10 years it's going to be drastically different than what it is now, and they're going to just make it better and better. Yeah. So it's going to be cool to watch and see. Last but not least.
Yeah, let's get back to the faction here.
Yeah. And so, like I said, believe it or not, that these do go in weight. And so lightest binding over here, heaviest binding over here. And so it is hard to believe, and it does kind of blow my mind sometimes, but this binding, with how simplistic it is, weighs 395 or advertised 395 with the brake. Without the brake, I think you save 30, 40 grams. Something like that. And so it is significant without the brake. But 395 grams for a binding that doesn't have a release value toe, doesn't have a release value heel. It's got just a U-spring, so that's lateral release and vertical release. There's no elasticity in the heel at all. But it's still one of my most favorite bindings on the market, like hands down. It's just strong. It's durable. We don't see a lot of them coming back broken. Sometimes these will loosen up on you, like that happened to my buddy Jeff, and all we had to do was just kind of pinch the rivet, and it was good as new again.
And what binding are we looking at here?
Yeah, sorry. This is the Atomic Backland. Also Solomon MTN. And so the exact same binding, just different colors. And so, you know, if you really like the Backland, you can get the MTN as well. And so super simplistic, super easy. You can kind of tell that I like super simplistic and easy bindings. And this is absolutely following suit. And I was debating back and forth between to get it with a brake or not get it with a brake. I think for this ski, potentially skiing it, I would take this up to Tux in the notch or in the resort. Having that brake just gives me a little bit more ease and sense of my ski might not run away. It probably still will, but because brakes in the backcountry don't really do anything. But it is, again, like I said, one of my favorite bindings because of how easy and simple and durable it is. You can replace this U-spring and your pins out in the field. All it is just one bolt in, slap the new one on, and then you're good to go if you were to ever break that.
Cool. So is it a U-spring or is it pins?
U-spring.
Cool.
U-spring. Yep. Yeah, super, super easy. There is one gripe that I have so the U-springs back here, they label them as women's, men's, and expert, which, I don't agree with that labeling at all. Which
just had to be different.
Yeah, which is kind of ridiculous because what is women's, what is men's? I know
that doesn't factor anything.
I know men that weigh 125 pounds, and I know women that weigh 180 pounds.
And I know women that ski way better than me. So
that is kind of it's a bit ass backwards in my opinion, and I don't know why that's still a thing. Maybe it's just not well known enough in the ski industry.
With the times here.
Yeah, but I don't know. They got to change that eventually. That's a bit ridiculous. Huh. And so it should be, but essentially what it's trying to say is a softer din, a mid din, and a stiffer din.
Release value,
not din.
Well, I don't know. To me, that doesn't really tell me anything because it could be, are we with the soft din? Are we talking like 4 to 6?
It says it on the pamphlet when you're mounting it, but I just don't like how they label it women's, men's, expert.
No, give me some numbers.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
It's a qualitative value, not a quantitative value.
Yeah. But that being said, you can replace them pretty darn easily. If you are feeling like this is getting a lot stickier and it's not moving as well, you can replace those pretty darn easy. You can bring them on in. We've got plenty of spare parts for these. You could potentially lube them up, but if you skied them hard for a season or two, you probably should replace them because, again, your release value is degraded and it's eventually going to lose out. But yeah, really strong, super easy. A nice kind of feature with this is you can run a flat mode, a mid mode, and a high mode, and that high mode is pretty darn high. So again, for those folks that don't have a good walking boot or have really inflexible ankles, having that really high mode is really nice. So you can do that, or you can just run it race style. So pins in the front, and then put that mid riser down and put that high riser down. And so pretty nice in that sense to where if you are doing a short lap and it's going to be just a steep short lap, just keep the pins right where they are and then drop that riser there. And then when you get to the top, boom, you can rip that, and then you're good to go. Another really nice feature is that you can, like I said, run it brake or with brake or brakeless. If this breaks like broken, you can rip it off and you don't have to run it with it. It is a independent brake system, so it doesn't rely on twisting of this, which is kind of nice because that just means it's a little bit more durable, a little bit more fixable, more replaceable versus some of these other guys like that ATK brake system relies on you turning that turret all the way around, which is convenient and nice, but if it does break, you got to bring it on in and fix it just because it's going to be a pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more moving parts and bells and whistles to replace said part. So, yeah. Yep. Simple, easy, solid binding. Like I got it because this binding is probably going to last a long, long time, and this is going to be my rock ski at some point, and I just wanted something that was going to stand the test of time.
Gonna keep on trucking. And you've enjoyed this ski for the most part?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. So, I had the Plume Wazo on there at some point, earlier in the season. But then I ended up moving that guy to over here. And when I had the Plumazo on there, I had it +3 from recommended. So it's got the classic, progressive, or new school. I had it, I think even a little bit above the new school there, to be able to ski it with a softer boot and just be a little bit more wiggly and noodly. And I think I liked it a little bit further forward than where it is now. Now it's right on the classic recommended line, and so I enjoy a little bit further forward mounted ski, but that's just me.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. When to go, plus or minus from factory recommended binding mount. You know, we could spend a whole episode.
We could have a whole nother talk about that.
Yeah. Tune in next week.
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah, let's do that later.
That's a big personal kind of debate, and there's a bunch of opinions on it, and they're all wrong and they're all right at the same time.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of it has to do with the length of your thigh and your femur and all that in relation to the lower part of your leg.
Yeah, what you had for breakfast that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. These two are very, very similar setups from what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
You know, why have both of these?
Well, I mean, this one skis a lot better, just with the binding that it has. This being 17 or 1750 grams. This guy in this length is weighing in at like 1390, I believe. So significantly lighter setup. Definitely noodlier, softer. And the binding itself just doesn't ski as well as that Raider. And so to me, this is my skiing confident, skiing harder. This is more of an adventure ski, something that I can take almost anywhere and feel confident. But I'm not going to be able to just like blast through stuff. But that's me. I got a buddy Josh who's on that ski, and he's been skiing that with the RT11 Evo, and he's been skiing it inbounds. He's been skiing it up in the notch. He's been doing backcountry tours. He did the Trivial Traverse on that setup, so he's taking that thing everywhere. And so, yeah, I think he might, beg to differ on my opinion there, but or disagree with me. But
that is a nice and light ski. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And I mean, when I had that Wazo on there, that 205 gram binding, it was significantly lighter too. And so.
Nice and soft. I like that.
Soft and noodly.
Yeah, cool.
Big fan of the soft and noodlies.
Yeah. I like stiff and snappy.
Yeah. Fair enough.
To each their own.
Fair enough. But yeah, that's bindings. That's kind of my quiver there, and why I chose him and why I like him. I think, like I said, you can kind of see a trend that I like minimal and simplistic bindings there. They all have their purpose. They all got their pros and their cons. But at the end of the day, they're all going to break. They're all all of them are going to break. But yeah, they're fixable. And that's why I chose them too. A lot of these are fixable. And so I like bindings that I can personally fix, but then are easy to fix. The companies are easy to work with. And so, yeah.
If you had to pick one of these setups, it's the only setup you could use for the rest of your life.
Oh, God, don't do that.
What would that be?
The one setup, I mean, it's the newest setup that I got, but it's my favorite so far. Is if I had to choose one, it would be this. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not the lightest setup. It's 108 underfoot, so it's somewhat impractical. But you ever had a setup or a ski that you jump on it and you need almost zero time to figure it out, and you're just I'm home.
Yeah.
I'm home.
They made this ski just for me.
This is how I ski. This is exactly how I have always wanted to ski, and I didn't know it until I jumped on this ski, and it just fits perfectly.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I'd say that ski would be it for me. And somewhat impractical, but I'm still in that honeymoon phase with that ski right now. So I'd have to choose that setup.
Sweet. Yeah. And you can realistically jump on most ski setups and learn how to ski it and eventually come to like it and love it. You know, we're super adaptable. You just have to, every skis differently. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's nice when you find that one that you don't have to figure out.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Yep. Well, Robby, we covered a lot of info today.
That was a lot.
If anybody has any questions, drop it in the comments below. We'll try to respond.
Yeah.
Give us a call.
Give us a call. Give us a shout out in the socials. Send us an email. Or come on into the shop. I clearly like to talk about bindings. Dylan likes to talk about bindings. And yeah, we like to talk about bindings. It's one of my favorite parts because there's so many different options.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And we've seen most of, I wouldn't say we've seen it all, but we've seen most of it. And,
seen a good bit.
Yeah, I don't think there's really ever been something that we necessarily, absolutely, I feel like we've been able to send people out the door happy just about every time.
Try to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try. Yeah. Definitely try. That's for sure.
Cool. Plug our contact info.
Yeah, just mountainopsvt.com for the website. And then phone number is 802-253-4531.
MountainOpsvt on Instagram.
Yep.
MountainOpsvt.com. MountainOpsvt on YouTube.
Yeah. There you go.
Cool.
Bindings.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Look at that. We did it. We did it.